Good morning and welcome to a virtual town hall hosted by your 28th District legislators. Today you will be seeing and hearing from Senator Tawana Nobles and Representatives Mari Levitt and Dan Bernowski. Some of you have submitted questions in advance and I will read those questions to the lawmakers. You may also submit your questions live via the chat box, so please submit your questions now and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Before we begin answering questions, I'd like to open the floor up to our lawmakers for some brief opening remarks. First, we'll hear from Senator Tawana Nobles. Senator Nobles is the president and CEO of the Tacoma Urban League, a University Place School Board director, and a former public school educator. Senator Nobles moved to the district 2 decades ago as part of a military family and has been honored to serve the community since. Senator Nobles now serves as vice chair of the Early Learning and K-12 Education and Higher Education and Workforce Development Committees. She is also a member of the Transportation Committee and the Behavioral Health Subcommittee. Senator Nobles.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Senator Tawana Nobles, and I'm very excited to be here this morning. It was already mentioned, several of my committees, and I look forward to talking about my work on those committees and some of the bills that I have put forward. I also want to mention that some of my priorities this session are COVID recovery and COVID relief, helping our students and teachers to safely return to school, focusing on public safety, including mental health resources, and just a variety of other caucus priorities such as police accountability and transparency, helping our community members to return to work and navigate ESD issues, connecting community members with information around vaccines and COVID testing. So again, just good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being so patient with our office. I'm a brand new legislator, 6 weeks in, and just want to thank you for being so generous and so gracious and patient. And I look forward to our conversation today.
Thank you. Next, I'll ask Representative Mari Levitt to share a few words. Rep. Levitt is a mom, small business owner, PTSA leader, and a former deputy director of Pierce County Human Services. She currently serves as vice chair of the College and Workforce Development Committee and is a member of the Capital Budget and Housing, Human Services, and Veterans Committees.
Thank you, Travis, and welcome everyone to our town hall. And it's great to be here with my new seatmates and Representative Bernowski and Senator Nobles, and to be able to have you join us this morning on a Saturday and take time away from your families so that we can answer the questions that are most important to you. I am focusing on COVID, all things COVID this session, along with economic recovery, building our workforce and developing, and public health to make sure that our kids can safely go back to school and that our workers can get back to work. And it's an honor to serve the beautiful 28th Legislative District, and I look forward to conversing with you this morning. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Next, we have Representative Dan Bernowski. Representative Bernowski is a lifelong Pierce County resident and served for 6 years in the Washington Army National Guard. He's a 20-year local firefighter who has been on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. Rep. Bernowski is the vice chair of the Transportation Committee and serves on the Healthcare and Wellness and Labor and Workplace Standards Committees.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone, for taking the time out of your Saturday to be here. I certainly appreciate it. I just wanted to round this out by saying that we have a fantastic team here in the 28th. Senator Nobles, Representative Ed Levitt, and I, we work together very well to serve you best. Some of the priorities that I'm working on this year, based upon my committee assignments and interests, are, as my seatmates mentioned, economic recovery. Not only do we need to help small businesses through this difficult time, but we also need to make sure that we have workplace protections in place so that when workers go back to work, they can do so safely and stay healthy. We're also working on fixing a lot of the issues with employment security. There's still a lot of friends and neighbors out there struggling to deal with just the Employment Security Department overall. And then finally, I'm also working on expanding the healthcare workforce, specifically substance use disorder professionals, as well as allowing emergency medical technicians to work in diversion centers. So thank you all again for being here this morning, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you. Now we'll begin taking your questions. we have some that have been submitted ahead of time, and we will read from those, but we are also taking them live. So if you have a question, please type it in the chat now. Our first question actually comes from on the topic of rail safety. And the question is pretty broad. It just asks, who oversees the safety of the railway currently? And I think that we actually had a couple of these. Some of them related to works that were done, have been happening since the Amtrak derailment in DuPont. So Representative Levitt, I thought maybe you would like to start off with that one.
Thank you, Travis, and thank you for the question. Since I was elected, rail safety has been a critical mission central for making sure that residents in the 28th Legislative District are safe, as is all Washingtonians. We all know that we had a tragic accident in DuPont just 3 years ago where 3 individuals' lives were lost and their families have suffered greatly as a result. And so making sure that our railways are safe across our state is a priority for me. And that's why I introduced House Bill 2287 last year that really did an assessment of our rail safety components, bringing together all stakeholders and voices. And out of that came a variety of different recommendations that I've put together in House Bill 1418 so that we have rail safety governance and oversight in Washington state. So when these accidents occur, and we know that they continue to occur, that we have someone kind of, watching and making sure that we are safe and that those incidents don't happen in the future. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. We have another question here, and this one is actually one that a lot of people have asked about, especially with everyone working from home, job hunting from home, schooling from home. And the question is pretty broad. It says, when is the Washington State Legislature planning to make Comcast and similar companies to be treated as utilities? And it sounds like this is in regards to maybe some of the bills that are on the bipartisan bills on broadband access, particularly maybe Representative Hansen's Public Broadband Act. Anyone in particular interested in taking that question?
Yeah, I can speak. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think we all do.
Well, Senator Nobles, why don't you start, and then Rep. Bernowski, you can also follow up.
Sure, and I'll make sure that our team drops in the chat a really helpful resource that talks about the Public Broadband Act, but I definitely recognize that a major gap right now that we are experiencing in our pandemic is access to broadband. And when I have been in conversation with students and educators and districts, I've heard many stories of our families struggling. And I know that in my own household, it's been a similar scenario. And I think House Bill 1336 has so many great elements, and I'm excited to see the bill progressed, and really look forward to Rep. Hansen's work on the bill, because I deeply care about this issue. It's an equity issue. We want to make sure that as our, broadband is essential and necessary and required to live, work, learn, that we do everything that we can to provide it as a public utility. It is not an easy process, but as legislators, we get to engage in the opportunity to bring things into fruition that we know will benefit our community. And as we emerge further into an age of technology, we have to take seriously how we can bring all of our students, especially our students with less access to devices or connectivity, to the point of quality education. So I'll be doing my part. I've already let Senator Wellman know that I'm interested in, working in partnership with her, because she's been leading this conversation as well on the Senate side. And I've had conversations with Washington State Department of Transportation to see, what role they can play. And I've learned some really interesting information. But the legislature is working tremendously hard to make this happen for community. And even in the short period of time I've been here, in just 6 weeks, I've been really excited about the conversations that are happening, and we want action. And so I think House Bill 1336 is a part of that action. And I know in my, daily job as well, I've done my part to be in conversation with Comcast and to demand better for our community members, and to simply help to purchase access to broadband and purchase laptops and get them in our community. But this is a required and critical element that we all need, and it should be more accessible as a public utility. So I'll keep working hard on it, and I'd love to also hear from my colleagues.
Yeah, thanks, Senator Nobles. Yeah, this is a huge priority, I think, for everyone in the legislature. And the good thing about it is that it's very bipartisan. So you see a lot of broadband needs, not only here in the local community, but in a lot of rural areas across the state as well. So, like I said, it's a real bipartisan issue, and it really affects us here in the 28th as well. So specifically, out on Anderson Island, I believe there is only one broadband provider, and at best, sometimes the service can be problematic. And Senator Nobles is exactly correct. This is not only an equity issue with being able to work from home and educate our children from home, but as we expand access to healthcare via telemedicine, being able to communicate with our healthcare providers, the broadband issue, access to quality broadband is absolutely critical to making sure that people in rural communities and certainly people here locally have access to those healthcare providers, especially now when we don't want to unnecessarily expose people to COVID-19. So it's a real key critical issue. And just for me personally, working from home, working remotely, I've had a couple of hiccups in my broadband service, and when that occurs, work stops. So we need to continue to be able to provide that better access. So what Senator Hansen's bill does is it will allow local jurisdictions to act as a public utility when it comes to broadband. It really, all it does is it opens the gate to make it an option. It in no place, replaces some of the current providers, but it's just a third option to allow access, to allow for competition, and to provide, to better have us, address the equity issue. And then there's another bill that one of my colleagues is working on, Representative Wiley, who is, so it's House Bill 1457. So it basically allows state highways to add infrastructure, so that way we can continue to expand broadband access into rural areas. So it's a good way to make broadband more accessible across the state. So thanks for the question.
Looks like we might be having some technical difficulties as a great emblematic example of the challenges with broadband. Travis, if you want to move to the next question, that'd be great. And while we're waiting for our moderator to join us again, there is a question in the chat, and I can go ahead and jump in, and it's by Verna, who said, "Can you describe any state level efforts there might be to limit large companies from profiting immensely while so many are struggling to meet basic needs?" And thank you, Verna, for the question. And I'll go ahead and jump in and then have my colleagues add anything they'd like to as well. We are all concerned about prices going up, especially at a time when our families are struggling significantly and our small businesses are shutting down. And so there is a bill that Senator Darneal on the Senate side has proposed at the request of the Attorney General's office that talks about price gouging. And we know that when COVID hit and the need for PPE occurred, there were several businesses who were taking advantage of folks and making sure that the prices that they had to offer for these very essential equipment and needs were skyrocketing. And so making sure that our Washington citizens aren't taken advantage of during a pandemic is critical, and grateful to the Senate for leading that charge along with the Attorney General's office to make sure that price gouging does not occur and that folks can continue to be able to be successful and build their way back to serving their communities and also taking care of their families. And it looks like Curtis has joined us again, and so we'll turn it back over to Curtis, and if my colleagues want to add anything to that question, that would be great.
Thank you, Rep. Levitt. I did co-sponsor that bill, and I think it is critically important for folks to support. And what I ask and what I'm finding, in order to keep large companies from profiting immensely, and the community does a really good job of testifying, but I had this thought earlier in the week that we just have to stay on top of voicing our opinions, sharing our stories, and testifying, because large companies have lots of lobbyists who show up, who sign in, who are testifying. And I have felt as a new legislator that they've made it clear what their opinions are and what they want as businesses, and are able to testify in that vein. And it reminded me how important it is for community to show up and share their stories and share how we need to choose people over profit. So please do continue to testify and sign in. Even if you can't testify in person, send your written testimony, but help us to make sure that we're telling the stories of people, and we can, reduce and eliminate those impacts. And I'm a small business supporter. I also want to make sure that we are listening to the voices of our community, and not prioritizing, profit and business over those voices.
Thank you. Am I back?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Well, this is how we do things in remote sessions. So we'll move on to the next question I was trying to ask earlier, which is a question that we had in the chat, which is, what are your opinions on House Bill 1477? This is the 988 crisis bill, and I think Rep. Bronowski, maybe you want to take that one.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the question. So I believe that 988, now that we're authorized to do it from the federal administration, would be a great tool to help members of our community in need at the times that they need it most. So what 988 does is when someone's experiencing an emergency related to mental health, basically they only have a couple of options. One is they can dial a 1-800 number, which not a whole lot of people can remember off the top of their head, and it's kind of tough to find. Or two, you can dial 911. So 911 is great, but you either get police, fire, or EMS. Now, mental health is its own unique area of expertise, where someone like me, that's a firefighter, EMT, I do my best and I have great training, but I'm not a mental health professional. So what this will do will automatically take the call and send it to a mental health professional dispatcher that is better able to assess the needs of the person in real time. And what it also does is it sets up a response mechanism to where mental health professionals can respond in a timely manner to help someone in a crisis. Again, the idea is to provide the most appropriate level of service at the time when somebody needs it most, and also to help keep people out of the emergency room when it's not always appropriate for them to be going to the emergency room. And then also it doesn't, it also will help people, from having to interact with law enforcement if they're not looking to interact with law enforcement at the time, if it's not appropriate. So again, it's a good idea. It's a good response mechanism. It's a good way to get people the most appropriate care that they need when they need it most. And it also helps us, keep beds at the emergency rooms open for people that need it for, heart attacks, strokes, trauma patients, et cetera. So it's going to be a great tool to complement the good work that we do in emergency services now. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. We've got another question. Now, this question was directed for Senator Nobles, but I feel like this is a question that probably is good for everyone. Gavin asks, how do you balance meeting your constituent desires from both sides of the aisle? I think that's always a challenge for lawmakers on how to be to balance the needs of the district. So Senator Nobles, maybe you want to start off and then we can go from there.
Absolutely. What I love about my style of leadership is I lead with being inclusive. And I think I also gained that from being a Black woman in America and knowing what it means to be excluded and not heard. And so I'm open, I don't discriminate against emails and judge based on party lines. I'm here to be a representative and to bring my values forward. But I think if folks have incredible ideas, they should share them. Everyone's invited to do so. Everyone's invited to our town halls and listening sessions. I respond back and forth to my colleagues. Just this week, I communicated about amendments or just support with my Republican colleagues on bills that I'm supporting. My first bill received, unanimous support from both sides of the aisle. And what I know about making decisions for our community is majority of the issues impact all of the issues impact all of us, but majority of the decisions that we need to make are nonpartisan issues. Majority of them. There are some of them that really come down to, party line values. But when we talk about housing and healthcare and childcare needs and what happens on our base, what happens in the city of Fircrest, the city of Lakewood, we are a community of people who have basic needs that need to be met. We are a community of people who want to be listened to by our elected officials, and I recognize that. So I am available to hear the needs of all of our community members. And while there are two primary parties, there are lots of folks who don't affiliate with those parties, and I'm here to represent them as well. So if you have feedback or input or want to talk to me or meet with my office, I know sometimes I can't meet with everyone, but my staff is available. Or if you want to send us an email, I represent the people, and that's not based on race, creed, religion. That's based on you live in my district, you live in this state, and so I am here to serve happily. And I look forward to hearing from you, Gavin, as well as other constituents in my district and from the folks that I hear from who are not in my district. But I am here to serve the people, and you can count on that no matter how you affiliate.
Great answer. Well, then I think we'll if folks are ready, we can move to another question. We actually have one.
Can I jump in on that one?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, and thank you, and great answer from our wonderful new senator. And I think the wonderful thing about the 28th legislative district is that we are diverse, and that we have folks who represent a variety of different perspectives, and they all come and talk about the important needs that they have in our district. And when I think about service, and I think all of us feel the same way, it's about serving our district. We don't serve a party. And I think that's important because the needs are real. Folks are struggling. Our small businesses are closing. And it's our responsibility and our honor to serve the entire district. And that means it's critically important that we work with all folks. The bills that I've sponsored are all bipartisan. They're voted on bipartisan. And I think that's the way that we get our work done and do it well. So thank you, Gavin, for the question. And we'll continue to work in a bipartisan fashion to serve our district well. Thank you.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mentioned the broadband issue a little bit earlier, how bipartisan that is. I mean, that is absolutely a bipartisan issue, or quite frankly, a nonpartisan issue. I mean, it's an equity issue. We need to continue to expand access. And I'm proud to say that my first bill had pretty broad bipartisan support too, that will allow for apprentices to be able to work as substance use disorder professionals. Again, stuff doesn't happen in the legislature unless it has great support regardless of party. So yeah, and I'm finding that I'm working with a lot of my Republican colleagues very well in the legislature, and I'm very proud of that really tough work. But it's what we absolutely have to do to do the right thing for the people of the state. So yeah, it's absolutely critical. Thank you.
Great. Well, we have another question that was submitted earlier this week via email. And this question is, why are state workers not being paid hazard pay during this dangerous pandemic? That's a question that's come up a couple of times in various town halls, and folks kind of want to understand what's the deal with hazard pay and how is that dealt with. So Rep. Bernofsky, maybe you want to start off with that one, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks. So it's pretty broad. I would just ask whoever submitted the question to maybe provide some clarification, because there's no question that some state workers, and if you're talking about workers for the state of Washington, are absolutely working in hazardous fields right now. But, you know, like for someone like me working in the legislature, also technically a state worker, I mean, I'm working remotely. So when I'm not working at the fire station, I don't know that it's appropriate for me to receive hazard pay as a state employee. That being said, there are many workers across the state that work in hazardous environments that aren't technically state workers that should absolutely be getting hazard pay. I mean, we talk to you know, local grocery store workers, for example. I mean, they've never been able to work remotely. They interact with the public, people that could or could not be carrying COVID-19. And I think that their local is doing, you know, certainly locals like UFCW 21 is doing a good work, you know, in advocating for that hazard pay for those specific workers. So I guess, you know, my answer is it does depend on the workforce. Absolutely, some state workers should be compensated for the hazardous work that they do, that they never signed up to do in the first place. When it comes to like, hey, I never expected to work during a pandemic. And, you know, think about workers at Western State Hospital, for example, where there have been a couple of outbreaks of COVID-19 between patients and staff. And, you know, they absolutely are, you know, working in an environment that they never expected to work in. They never expected to work at Western State Hospital during a pandemic when you're in close quarters, and you know, you can't compel you know, a patient to wear a facial covering for protection, for example. So this is a, you know, something that I wholeheartedly support, and you know, we need to figure out a way to get those critical workers the hazard pay they deserve, but keeping in mind that, you know, there are some workers such as myself, that's a state worker, that, you know, it wouldn't be appropriate for them to receive hazard pay. But I'd love to have the individual that sent that question reach out to me, give me a call or an email, and I'd love to have a more in-depth conversation to make sure that the workers that need hazard pay should be getting hazard pay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We did just get another question in the chat that's also related to pay, but kind of the flip side. The question is from Yolanda, and Yolanda asks, do you believe that legislators should get pay raises during times when state workers are being furloughed or required to take pay cuts? I know that this question comes up a lot. And so I think whoever wants to take it first, happy to let you take the lead on that. So.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and thank you, Travis, and thank you for the question. And I don't, and so I don't believe that we should be getting pay raises when families are struggling and can't afford to, or making tough decisions between paying their utility bill or buying groceries. And so I think it's incumbent on us to not get pay raises. And so I'm glad the Citizens Commission made the choice this year not to give state legislators pay raises. And I hope they continue that good work. It is a decision made by a Citizens Commission, but I'm grateful that they made the choice that they did. And I don't believe we should be getting pay raises during this very difficult time for our residents in the 28th. Thank you for the question.
Agreed. I agree with Representative Levitt 100% on everything she just said.
Great. We have a question here that is actually about law enforcement reforms. And this is from Mike, who asks, with respect to law enforcement reforms, will providing local jurisdictions to take timely actions and have the final say in discipline of their uniformed personnel without being subject to reversal by a PERC arbitrator? That's definitely more policy that I'm familiar with, but I think the broader question here is, you know, how are local jurisdictions going to play a role in any of these police reforms and measures and things that are before the legislature? Senator Nobles, I see you nodding your head. Are you interested in speaking to this first?
I mean, I can speak on it a little bit, I guess. I mean, I think when it comes to police accountability, entities, government entities will play their role. I do see these issues as being very local, and those decisions being made local. Hiring and firing, those are local decisions. And so other entities can help with independent investigations. The community can put, pressure on these entities or show support. Everyone plays a role, but I do think it is a very local issue. And at the end of the day, those cities and or other municipalities will make the decision about what will happen with and to its officers, its budgets, and that isn't something that we can necessarily legislate away. And so what I have learned in just 6 weeks is, we are limited in the role that we play as legislators, but there are things that we can do around expanding police transparency and accountability. And for example, I dropped a bill that's going to focus on data collection. It works in partnership with local government, because I'm asking them to please track use of force data. And we're working all together to come up with ideas around where it's reported, how it's reported, what things we're asking for. But we all work together. But I feel like the ultimate decision and the bulk of the work is going to rest with the local with local government. And so that's not a role that we necessarily get to play or take away from our local government. Hopefully that's answering the question. I mean, I was nodding my head just in, like acknowledging it's a good question, but I just feel like those are local government decisions, and we won't be able to take that away because we're limited in what we get to do. But I'm proud of the work that the legislature is accomplishing and trying to put forth and asking for more transparency and more accountability.
Yeah, and thank you, Mike, for the question. And I know it's been challenging sometimes for our local jurisdictions who did make decisions, hiring and moving someone on decisions, and to have that decision reversed and for the officer to come back to the force can be demoralizing, both for the city and the community. And so the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs are engaged in this very important work, as are others and local jurisdictions as well. Law enforcement chiefs all around our state are involved in these various conversations. And the notion of arbitration is one that I know our cities struggle with, because when decisions are reversed, it really does hinder their force's ability to build accountability with their force, but then also transparency in the community and to build the trust and confidence that the community has with the very important and great work that our law enforcement officers are doing. The bulk of folks are really providing extraordinary service, and we want to provide them opportunity to continue that great service. But when those challenges do occur, and when folks aren't living up to their oath, that we need to provide our local jurisdictions tools in the toolbox. And I think the state is working hard this session to be able to balance those very complex issues together. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thanks. And, I just want to add that we need to have local jurisdictions as partners in some investments that need to be made. Specifically, when it comes to body-worn cameras and public records requests for those videos, there has been pushback by some administrations, specifically police administrations, to implement these critical tools because of cost. And, I understand that sometimes equipment, yes, can be expensive, but we absolutely need local jurisdictions to be a partner in supplying things like body cameras to our local law enforcement officers who, for one, absolutely want the body cameras. Two, the community would also like to have those body cameras for accountability reasons. So we absolutely need to invest in that equipment and get it to our law enforcement officers quickly. So thank you.
Great. So we're getting some good questions, and we missed a few. So I'm actually going to go back. This is a question actually directed for Senator Nobles, and then we've got one on the Worker Protection Act that I think folks might want to answer. So for this question for Senator Nobles, this is from David, and wants you to explain how a bill that you sponsored for Washington State taxpayer unemployment subsidy for undocumented workers in the state, how that benefits the folks in your district.
Thank you. That's such a great question. And, this bill is really important to me and to many others as we talk about COVID recovery and economic recovery. And Rep. Levitt said it so beautifully earlier that our district is so diverse. And I've lived in this community for a couple of decades nearly. And what I know is, even though, and I'm gonna be frank with you, just real honest. So I live in Fircrest, and we're really, we're right here on the cusp of University Place. And what I know about folks who don't live here, when they talk about our community, there definitely is an assumption that our community is less diverse, and in fact, more white, that there are fewer languages, that there's less poverty than we actually experience here in the 28th. And I think that also ties into, the lack of conversation around the amount of resources that we still need in the 28th. We have a very beautiful district, and we do have things like wonderful school districts. Our school districts still have needs. We have things like beautiful golf courses, but we still have a need for, active transportation and sidewalks and just many improvements. And this is another area of focus where, as lovely as our district is, it is also a district that is made up of wonderful and lovely immigrant community members. And this pandemic, one thing that I know is this pandemic has showed us that many of our immigrant community members and undocumented community members are working in industries that have been hit the hardest by this pandemic. And when we talk about recovering and economic recovery, it has to be inclusive and it has to be equitable. And we are all interdependent. I truly believe no one can be left behind. I also know, based on the data that I have received, that roughly 1.1 million residents are immigrants. And what I know is, our immigrant and undocumented community members have contributed nearly $400 million to the state and federal unemployment fund. So sometimes this conversation is about handouts and giving things to people, which we do for businesses and all types of folks all the time. But this is not about a handout. We have community members who've paid into a system and have not been able to access from those benefits. And as I stated earlier, industries employing the highest numbers of undocumented workers, hospitality, retail, construction, have been hit the hardest by this pandemic, which means that there's a disproportionate impact on communities of color, and especially our undocumented workers. This is including our district, where many of our community members are immigrants or undocumented workers. And many of these community members who I want to see benefit from this work in the retail or hospitality industries that we visit here in our district. So because of the person that I am, I care about the humanity of our community. And I said earlier, not going to discriminate based on your status, based on your religion, based on your political party. So similar to that first question, I don't know what's behind this question, but I'm just saying in general, sometimes we're okay to not exclude in some areas, but want to exclude it in others. And I just stand against that. So I want to make sure that I'm thinking about our Pacific Islander community, our Latinx community, our populations that have been hit the hardest by this pandemic, and have been, hospitalized at a higher rate due to COVID, are on the front lines, are working in our grocery stores, but just want to make sure that they have access to benefits that they actually have paid into. So this bill, I think, helps to address a real injustice in our community, that we are not excluding these workers. And it's important for others to hear that helping someone else is not taking away from you. Right? Helping community members in need is not a conversation around, but well, what about this group? We want to focus on all of our community members and give everyone what they need. And so I'm all about a just and equitable method of recovery that needs to be inclusive. And I really do ask that folks across our district be in support of that, whether we're talking about education or unemployment benefits, or worker safety, whatever it is, that we are truly being inclusive and not inclusive in some occasions, or on some occasions.
Thank you. We have a question here from Joshua. The question is, what is the status on the Worker Protection Act, and do you all support it? And Rep. Bernofsky, would you like to start off on this one?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a proud co-sponsor of the Worker Protection Act. Going back to one of our first questions, when we start getting back to work, we need to make sure that critical workplace protections remain in place, and that we make them a little bit more robust. The Worker Protection Act will absolutely do that. So the current status is we voted it out of committee in Labor and Workplace Standards, and it moved on to appropriations, where it's going to be heard in executive committee on the 22nd. So again, this is going to really make it to where workers can make sure that they're paid money's owed to them, for example, if for whatever reason they're a victim of wage theft. If workplace safety violations occur, workers can help protect themselves in that instance as well. So it's a really critical workplace protection piece, hence the name of the bill, the Workplace Protection Act, HB 1076. And I really hope that we're able to move on this bill, this legislative session, so that way workers can be as safe, so workers can keep as safe as they possibly can be when they're in the workplace, especially now during COVID. So thank you for the question.
Okay. I wanted to jump to another question that came from David. David directed this towards Representative Levitt, and he said that asked that you take legislative action to ensure that Washington State National Guard service members that were deployed earlier this year are acknowledged for their service during this time in our nation's history. And so, Rep. Levitt, maybe you want to talk about some of your work on for veterans and service members and all that. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, David. And I did a posting not that long ago on this week's I Heart Our National Guard, and posted the work and the great work that our Washington National Guard members are doing. They're my sheroes and heroes. They have been out in full force helping in vaccination sites. They have been delivering and packing and offering food to our many communities across. And were it not for our Washington National Guard members, during COVID, our food bank volunteer offerings and options would have been depleted, because many of our volunteers were older and weren't able to get out and do the volunteer work that we have been counting on them to do. And so our National Guard deserves so many thanks for the great work, and anything we can do to honor them, I am absolutely up for, and so grateful for their service. And we are lucky in the 28th Legislative District to serve JBLM and to have Camp Murray, our Washington National Guard, in our district. And it's really a tremendous honor. And that's why I've supported much legislation that focuses on our military families and our active duty members and our veterans in our community, whether it's making sure that they get educational assistance. Our National Guard members get educational assistance similar to the federal government, so that they can, when they're ready to go to school, to take advantage of that educational assistance, to get them increases in pay when they're fighting wildfires or doing other kinds of land response issues, that they are able to get the pay that they so desperately deserve, and they hadn't got a pay increase in 30 years, whether it's increasing the National Guard age to allow our National Guard members who are ready and able to serve, that they can continue to serve and not be discriminated against based on their happenstance of when they were born. And that's legislation that's moving on this session. And in addition to making sure that when our veterans and our military families join our communities, that they can get registered in school in advance and do that great work. So it's really an honor to continue to advocate for our veterans and our military members. And again, I love our National Guard members. I think, again, they are our sheroes and heroes, and anything we can do to uplift them and build them up and thank their families for their service as well, I think is critical to do. Thank you for the question.
Great. Thank you. So we've actually had a couple of questions come in about schools. As you all know, that's a very contentious and issue from folks, but we have a couple of questions that came in, and one in the chat is actually from Melissa. And Melissa asks, what is the reason that teachers and children are not 100% in person at schools? Melissa acknowledges that other folks are working, store clerks and drivers and so on. Why aren't people actually in classrooms, and also why do districts have to submit reopening plans by March 1st to get the recent part of the COVID package that the legislature passed, yet they don't actually have to reopen? So that's a question that came from Melissa. who is a constituent. So Senator Nobles, maybe you want to start off with that one and we can go from there.
Thank you. I absolutely can start there. I think the 100% part is a great question. I mean, I chose to keep my kids home at this point. So it's not going to be at 100% because there are several of us families who, because we have a choice, are choosing to keep our kids home for a variety of reasons. Family structure, health needs, risk. There are so many issues where all of us are simply not ready to return, even though it's an option in our district. And what I also know is we want our schools to have a plan for sure for reopening. So I do think it is important to, submit a plan, even if schools are not at 100%. We want to make sure that we are thinking about keeping our students and teachers, staff safe at school. And I'm excited that we are asking for folks to communicate how to do so. And I think families want to know that. Faculty and staff want to know what the plan is as well. So I think that the plan is essential, whether it's connected to funding or not. And I think another part of the 100% is, there are a lot of teachers and staff who have some of the same fears that we do as, families of students, who just simply for their health, for the individuals who live in their household are, not prepared or feel fearful of taking that risk. So some folks are comfortable. And I think in our district, about 60%, I forget if it was a specific grade level, but we have lots of families in our district in University Place who have returned to school, but that's not everyone's comfort area. And I think it does help our district because kids are already staggered. They're only going a couple of days a week. Linda Gaines. There are, the schedules for my family, the schedule just simply wouldn't work. It's like more work to think about what day I have, 3 kids still at home who are at 3 different schools and their days of the week are different and coordinating transportation. It's really a challenge. So there are a variety of reasons, but I also just am not prepared for my kids to be in the all group setting, but even just the scheduling for me is just more complex to send my family back since I have a lot of that burden on me to, keep the kids organized. So there are a variety of reasons, but we are, again, in the state legislature, I know, doing our part. I love that, Rep. Levitt, led an effort even for us to, be prepared to respond to the governor to demand that we do better as far as providing vaccines for our teachers. But we are, tracking the issues and using our voices to advocate for getting our students and teachers safely return to school. But it's a process. And so while we want to put pressure and take action, we also recognize it's going to take some time and strategy and patience as well.
Great. Thank you. So one question that we received here in the inbox, I wanted to run by you all because a lot of folks have questions about childcare. The question asks is, how is the legislature addressing childcare in our state? It's the foundation to reopening our economy. And so what is being done to ensure that working parents have a safe and high quality place for children to learn and play while the parents are at work until the COVID crisis is over?
Yeah.
Rep. Levitt, I was going to direct to you. I know that this is something important to you, so yeah. I'll let you start.
Thank you, Travis, and apologies for getting out ahead of my skis on that one. Thank you for the question. As a mom with 3 children at home who are doing online learning, and one of which actually starts school on Monday, will be his first day in-person learning, which I'm looking forward to. Childcare was an issue of tremendous concern for our businesses and our workers pre-COVID. Since COVID has occurred, our childcare facilities have shut down. Many have closed because they couldn't afford to continue to operate. And our families are having to make very difficult decisions. Many, primarily women, have had to leave their jobs because they didn't have adequate childcare and stay home, which means that oftentimes they went from a 2-income family to a 1-income family. And so we are working very hard in the legislature this year, as we have in the past years. But because of the pandemic, it's created new opportunities and new challenges to focus on childcare. And there are 3 bills that I would invite you to watch. One is the Fair Start Start for Kids Act, which is House Bill 1213, which does a variety of things, including making sure that we're taking away copays and we're adding some subsidies for our very important providers to make sure that they can stay afloat. There's also House Bill 1331 that is focusing on our licensing fees and being able to reduce our licensing fees so our childcare providers can continue to operate or begin and be able to operate in a way that's successful and that's accessible and available to our members and families who need to get to work. And then the other one is House Bill 1370. I sit on the Capital Budget Committee, and the capital budget really focuses on the infrastructure needs of our state, and early learning facilities and building early learning facilities is an important infrastructure need. And so House Bill 1370 will increase opportunity to do that. And then there's a Senate bill that's coming over that I hope comes over to the House, and I will be grateful to vote for it if it does. And that eliminates fees for up to 2 years for our child care providers so that they can, again, keep themselves stable or get themselves stable and then provide the important childcare opportunities because our families are struggling. I know of folks who've had to leave their jobs and that really has impacted the family budget. And so we need for our workforce to develop, and we can't do that unless we have quality and accessible childcare. And I know our businesses alike agree. Thank you for the question.
And it is a great question. And I serve on 2 education committees, one of them focusing on early childhood education, early learning, and the Senate bills that Rep. Levitt mentioned, we did vote on and have exec out of committee to, yes, try to eliminate fees that are creating barriers so we can provide access to additional childcare resources, and just doing everything that we can to expand access. And the same, any bills that come over from the House that are going to help us to expand how childcare, which I also want to see for our military families, I definitely will be supportive of.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, childcare, we need to think of it as a key piece of infrastructure, like Rep. Levitt said. I mean, businesses are relying on their workers to be able to get to work, but also be able to have the children of their employees taken care of. And I think also a critical piece of this is to make sure that the child care workforce is adequately compensated for the really challenging and very important work that they do. We can subsidize child care, and we can create facilities for kids to be taken care of. But if we don't pay the workers to be able to do that work in the first place, and we're going to have a real workplace shortage. So that's a real critical piece of making childcare accessible to members of our communities, making sure that the childcare workforce is adequately compensated for the very important work that they do. So yeah, thank you for the childcare question.
Thank you. So we're coming up close. This might be our last question. Just kind of depends on how fast this goes. But we've got a question here about a bill that's a kind of interesting bill. It's House Bill 1395. Then this person had emailed in wanting to know your thoughts on this bill. This is a bill that ensures equity in farming through the Washington State Department of Agriculture. And I believe this was sponsored by a neighboring district member, Representative Morgan. So anyone interested? Yeah, Senator Nobles, if you want to start.
Yeah, I absolutely am supportive. Again, it's a House bill, but I'm a member of the Black Caucus along with Rep. Morgan, and I also believe that Rep. Berg is supportive of this. But it is, when we start talking about, again, equity and access and making sure that when we're talking about rural areas and farming and agriculture, that we are thinking about too our underrepresented communities and doing everything that we can to provide access. So I am supportive of this bill and just keeping at the forefront of our minds that there is great diversity in our farming and agriculture industries, and we want to continue to support that. And this bill gets closer to that. And I know that one of our priorities too in our Black Caucus is making sure that we're talking about, land ownership and just, things that we can do that are outside the box, but are real needs and priorities for all of our communities. And there may be others who want to jump in and answer this question. I just, since we're wrapping up and leaving, just want to thank you all for your time and for being here. Thank you for your amazing questions. And again, the volume of emails, and I'm learning this, my staff know I love to respond to everyone, but in this industry with this job, we simply can't get back to folks same day or even same week. But it may take us a week or two to get back to you, unless it's a pressing issue where you need case management. But if it's a typical question or a question about a bill, be patient with us, as it may take us a couple of weeks to get back to you. But I promise you, it's just because of sheer volume and not because your message or email is not a priority. We value each and every one of you and want you to continue communicating with us. Thank you.
Well, you know what? I think we maybe have time for one more question, because this was one that was submitted and reflects a question that a lot of legislators are getting. This person says, my wife and I own a salon. We have been living off of our savings to make ends meet. What is being done to ensure small businesses like mine can remain open and start making money again? I know that's a question that probably everyone wants to answer, and might also be one in which you can refer to some legislative action that has happened recently to help these folks out.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in, and thank you for the question. And again, our small businesses are critical, and they are the backbone of our local economy. And so we need to do everything we can for our small business owners. House Bill 1368 that was just signed by the governor yesterday, infuses $240 million in for our small business owners to be able to access grants. In particular, I'm not a huge fan of our small business loans, but grants to be able to help our small business owners stay afloat. Senate Bill 5061 assists our small businesses in terms of making sure that the unemployment insurance taxes that our small businesses are paying, the smallest businesses are the ones who get hit the hardest with this, and they were about to go over a cliff. And so fortunately, the governor signed that bill last week to make sure that these are part of our early action bills to shore up our small businesses, and then making sure we're providing unemployment insurance opportunities and expanding that for PUA for those who maybe not have gotten relief from the state, and that we can partner with our federal folks in order to make sure that we're getting those dollars out to our small businesses and the workers to make sure that they can remain in their jobs and our small business owners can keep them. And then finally, House Bill 1095 for those small businesses who had to take out a loan or a grant. We wanted to make sure that they don't get taxed on those dollars that they were able to bring in to be able to keep their employees in line. And the governor just signed that bill as well, which will be making sure that they don't have a B&O tax on those dollars that they were brought in. So much work to be done, no doubt. But those are some of our early action bills that were a priority for this legislature this session. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add briefly that we need to continue to do the very important work that we're doing as a community in regards to slowing the spread of COVID-19 and to continue to just crush it. I mean, we've got to get through this pandemic in order for small businesses to survive. So, I see people out in the community. We're doing an excellent job of wearing masks when in public. We're doing an excellent job of social distancing. But I just want to emphasize that for everyone that wants to get a vaccine, go get the vaccine. That's key to getting through this pandemic, to where small businesses can open back up, kids can get back to school, and our society's most vulnerable are able to stay healthy from COVID-19. So let's continue to be diligent on this. This is critical, is that we just crush COVID-19 and get past this pandemic. So thank you for the question.
And I just want to add a resource that Department of Commerce also has some funds for small businesses. So while I know it may be tough to apply for loans, please do use some of those state resources or county resources or city resources for our small businesses as well.
Thank you. We are unfortunately out of time, and that was our last question. So thank you for everyone who participated in our virtual town hall. We will have contact information for each of the members' office up on the screen. So just once this ends, you'll see information pop up. So stick around to catch that. I'm going to turn this back over to the legislators for some closing remarks. Representative Leavitt, would you like to go first? And then we'll hear from Representative Bronowski and Senator Nobles.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Travis. And thank you to everyone who joined us this morning. It was an honor to welcome you into our homes and spend a Saturday morning with you. We are, again, it's a privilege to serve our beautiful 28th Legislative District. We do know that folks are struggling, and this is one of the most severe pandemics that we all have faced for a very long time in our state. And it's our obligation and our responsibility to make sure that we're assisting you. And so please reach out to our legislative offices. While we are in a virtual session, we are available, and we have staff and ourselves who are here to serve you and want to serve you. So please reach out at any time. And if there's anything that we can do for you, whether it's unemployment insurance and navigating that brutal system that it is, or helping your small business, we want to hear from you and want to serve you. So thank you all for joining us. And it's my honor to turn it over to Rep. Bernowski to make some closing comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Leavitt. And yes, thanks to all of you that took the time out of a beautiful Saturday to listen to us and share some of the concerns and issues that you care about. I just want to invite everyone to stay online, stay in touch. Certainly, if you need anything from my office or our offices, email and call. I'm getting a lot of really good value meeting with constituents virtually, and hopefully if you have the time, if there's an issue that's important to you, whether it's an advocacy group or something else, our job is to hear you and listen to you, so that way we can be the most effective legislators on your behalf. So thank you so much. Keep questions coming, keep emails coming, phone calls coming, and I look forward to continuing to hear from all of you in the near future. And with that, I will pass it on to Senator Nobles.
Thank you, Rep. Bernowski. Again, I just want to thank you all for your time. My team is dropping in the chat ways to stay connected with us. We also dropped some resources about vaccines and other things. But if you connect to my website, my Senate website, you can find all of my bills, things that I'm co-sponsoring, sign up for the newsletter. I mean, there are incredible things that the three of us are working on to support our district. We're funding budget proposals, we're submitting budget provisos, we're doing really incredible stuff and really trying to think of the needs of our community, but learn best when you communicate directly. And again, please don't judge our response time or ability to respond as a measure of the importance of what you are communicating. We are receiving it and filtering through it, and we'll make sure that we get back to folks. But we want to keep the lines of communication open, and just thank you all for being our constituents, for being concerned and engaged, and for all of your hard work. Thank you all.
Thank you. That is all the time we have this morning. So thank you again for attending today's event. If we did not get to your question, we will be posting contact information, and it will be up on the screen here shortly. So you can reach out to the members' offices directly via email or phone. Have a great rest of your weekend.